Another large storm will be coming to the United States over the next few days, and this is going to bring a little bit more severe weather to areas like the Central Plains and as well as the Midwest and eventually the Ohio Valley, where some more damaging winds, hail, and a couple of tornadoes will be possible. In addition to this, we're going to give you an update on the potential tropical storm that could develop as we go into next week in the Caribbean Sea and why this could be a big threat for the United States. Let's begin with what's happening across the United States this morning, and overall we had a pretty interesting day yesterday of some severe weather. Though it wasn't a full-blown outbreak of severe weather, we did end up having some scattered severe storms in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and even back into Kansas and Oklahoma. We ended up having one large tornado yesterday back over in northeast Minnesota near Cotton, Minnesota. Highly recommend you go back and watch our live stream from yesterday. We were live covering it. It got pretty hairy, but overall the storms have now moved into the Midwest, and those storms have been weakening quite a bit as we've gone into the morning hours. But we are going to watch for one more round of some isolated severe weather today in parts of the Midwest, and we'll talk more about that here in just a moment. Back over in the Northeast, we do have a few showers that have been moving in. A little offshore low pressure system has brought a little bit of activity there, but again, nothing really out of the ordinary. And then back over here on the West Coast, we're going to be watching for another trough to move over the Rocky Mountains this weekend, and that is what's going to spawn the potential for more severe weather Saturday until about Monday or so across parts of the United States. And we're going to talk more about that here in just a second. Now let's talk more about that severe weather potential for the next few days, and we'll begin with today, which is Flying Fences Friday. We do have two marginal threats of severe weather, one of which goes from Michigan back into southeast Missouri, relatively thin area, and then we also have another one back over in Nebraska, Missouri, and back through most of Kansas and northern Oklahoma. And the main concern for today will be damaging winds and also some large hail. It'll be a very isolated risk though in nature, not really as widespread as yesterday, and even though yesterday wasn't very widespread, at least gives you an idea that this is not going to be nearly as significant as yesterday. The tornado threat is very close to zero. I wouldn't rule out a brief spin up maybe in like northwest Indiana, but I'm really not too concerned today about the tornado risk. Now once we go into Saturday, I think things get a little bit more interesting, but I think things will ramp up more as well as we go into Sunday into Monday. We are going to begin with three different areas to watch for on Saturday. We got one over in the mid-Atlantic, we got another one back over in the western Midwest, and then we have another one back over in Texas and New Mexico. And believe it or not, this will actually be the most interesting risk on Saturday, where the potential for damaging winds, large hail, and also maybe an isolated tornado or two will be a possibility. So definitely something to watch for down in those areas. We are going to talk more about Sunday and Monday's severe weather potential in just a moment. I do want to bring you through today's severe weather threat. Showers and storms weakening this morning. By around lunchtime, we're going to start to see some storms firing off near Lake Michigan. Again, these are really not going to be anything too crazy, mostly just a damaging wind threat. Wouldn't rule out, again, maybe some isolated hail, maybe a brief spin up, but we're not looking at anything like yesterday. Storms will move across Indiana, mostly isolated damaging winds, and eventually they'll continue to move down to the south. Ohio will see a little bit of rain, but unfortunately the drought just is going to continue, guys. I don't know what to tell you, but Ohio has just been getting unlucky when it comes to any rainfall. We really need rain in Ohio and West Virginia. There's a pretty big drought happening there, with some areas in the highest level drought category, an exceptional drought, so really bad stuff there. Once we go into Saturday, we'll get probably another round of storms in Missouri. This is going to be mostly just a wind threat moving towards like St. Louis and eventually into southeast Missouri throughout the afternoon, and then more reinitiation going into the evening hours on Saturday. We are going to be watching for lots of showers and thunderstorms on Saturday across the Central Plains, but keep in mind, quality over quantity. In this case, we are talking a lot about quantity on Saturday. Across the Central and Southern Plains on Friday, we're not really talking about much. Once we go into tomorrow, though, we are going to be watching for just an explosion of showers and thunderstorms. This is during the morning hours. Notice we'll have some showers and storms out there just kind of all over the place. But look at this by around, maybe 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Things are going to get really crazy. We're going to have showers and storms basically everywhere, anywhere from the Midwest all the way back into the Southern Plains. A very disorganized area of storm activity. One area, though, that will be more organized will be back down in New Mexico and West Texas, where a few of these storms will have the potential for damaging winds, hail, and again, an isolated tornado or two, perhaps even a photogenic tornado or two, will be possible back over in West Texas during the late afternoon hours. So definitely an interesting day, especially if you are a storm chaser. As we go later into the evening, it's just going to be a mess out there. A lot of these storms moving west to east, and so these will be mostly just wind producers for anything that is severe, but just a lot of rain overall out of the system. Now, this is what we're talking about in terms of the large-scale weather pattern over the next few days. We have this trough that's going to be back over in the four quarter states for Saturday, but once once we go into Sunday, this is going to continue to move to the east, and it's going to be slightly negatively tilted, and that should bring the potential for another round or two of severe weather on Sunday, perhaps back over in parts of the Central Plains and into the Midwest, and then also on Monday, we'll be watching the Midwest and perhaps the western Ohio Valley for a little bit of severe weather. So that's something to watch for out of this system. Once we go into the middle of next week, we are going to have another large-scale trough enter the United States. This is important for a couple of reasons. One, it could bring a little bit more rain to the country, but that's not really the biggest thing. The biggest thing out of this is if we do get a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico later this week, which is a possibility, this trough could steer this back over towards Florida or even into the southeast. If this trough, though, does end up being a little bit faster and a bit weaker than forecasted, that potential hurricane could actually go more towards Texas or Louisiana. So that's a big reason why we're talking about this later this week, because that could be a big factor for the tropics if something does develop. This is what it looks like by next weekend. Things look relatively quiet. Again, perhaps an active weather pattern in the southeast or the southern plains, depending on where that perhaps tropical system goes. And then once we go into the very end of September, we might start to see some pretty big storm activity, perhaps the return of our second severe weather season, which does typically begin near the end of September or in early October. This is what the future radar looks like for the next several days. Just to break this down into simplistic terms, this is what it looks like for Saturday. Notice that we'll have that trough moving over the Rocky Mountains. Things are going to get pretty active during the afternoon and evening hours across much of the Central Plains and the Midwest. Once we go into Sunday, we are going to be watching for another round of showers and thunderstorms, and there will be a potential for some severe weather, predominantly from maybe central or north Texas all the way back into northern Missouri and western Illinois. This is mostly going to be a wind and hail threat, I think, for Sunday, maybe a very low-end tornado risk. And then once we go into Monday, this trough will move into the Midwest, and it's going to stay relatively disorganized. So I think the threat of severe weather will remain again on the lower side of things. But if you are back over in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, or very far southern Wisconsin, just stay alert that we might see a little bit of severe weather on Monday, perhaps even a live stream. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. And then once we go into Tuesday, that trough continues to move northeast with a few more showers and thunderstorms in the Ohio Valley and also back into southern Canada. And then by Wednesday, this is slowly moving into the northeast with some showers and some storms. And this is definitely needed rainfall, especially for Ohio, West Virginia, and even back into New England. And then once we go into Thursday into Friday of next week, things become more uncertain. A couple of things could happen, one of which is that we could already have a tropical storm or even maybe a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico by Thursday, depending on the timing and when this system actually develops. Another possibility is what the European model is showing, where it doesn't show anything in the Gulf of Mexico and rather has a delayed development of this tropical system, and it could actually end up going towards Texas. So that's a key thing to watch for as we go into the rest of these next few days to see what the trends look like on the computer models, because they are still all over the place with this potential tropical system that could develop. If you didn't know what I was talking about, that orange area that's in the Caribbean Sea and also the southern Gulf of Mexico is where we currently have a medium chance over the next 7 days of there being a tropical storm or hurricane that does develop. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this does go to a higher probability, maybe later today or tomorrow, so definitely something to watch for. We also have two other little lemons back over in the Atlantic Ocean right now. Neither of these look like they're going to develop into anything significant at this point, but we'll be keeping a close eye on it as we continue to go further into hurricane season. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.